Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Grace Christian Fellowship. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Oh, look at this. New announcements. We have almost just the week before the men's retreat, the ladies are having a Bible study, which is good. And we have special prayer time praying for the guys that, were there. So thank you for your prayers. I think we're getting some guidance on how the Lord wants us to share for the men's retreat. So just keep praying for that. There you go. And the men's retreat is the 16th through 18th. So if you have any questions, let me know on that one. And then I see September 24th, the women's hand-in-hand event. I like how we're kind of sandwiched between the women's events here. I think that might be intentional. I don't know. I know they wouldn't admit it, but there you go. So if you have any questions, who's handling the women's hand-in-hand questions? Is that Santa? So if you have any questions about that, ask Santa. All right. Anything else going on that we need to know about? By the way, Sarah's still doing fine. My wife in Texas, for those who don't know. She was working from home the whole time she was there the first week. So Friday she was finally now on vacation. So there you go. So, and I'll be going to fetch her pretty soon. Bring her back from Texas. I'm always going to fetch my wife.
Yeah, you are.
What's up with that? All right. There you go. Well, let's pray and get ready to dive into God's Word. Father God, we just thank you for this time of worship and now time of worship in your Word. Lord, I just pray that you would just speak to our hearts. And Father, help us to listen. I pray that you would soften our hearts to allow your word to soak in. And let it be something that we just chew on throughout the rest of the week. Change our hearts. And I just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 through 25. The counterpart. Creation of the first woman. Kind of interesting to think about this in a sense. When we describe that we're all from Adam, as even true for Eve. Eve is from Adam. When we think about this, and then, of course, when I was thinking about this, what was God thinking? Of course, what I mean by that is, why did God delay this? What was he doing? Why was he holding off this next part of creation? What was happening with that? What was he trying to have Adam understand? I mean, why? Why did God create the woman the way he did? He could have just did like he did Adam and just scooped up the dust and poof, lady, there you go. Why did he do that? Why? And then when we think about this whole question of creation of woman, what was this relationship intended to be? I mean, we see a lot of different ideas nowadays, and a lot of different cultural ideas. Some will look at the woman as like the servant. She's subordinate. Sometimes a partner. Sometimes a supervisor. It's like all these roles. What did God intend it to be? And we were given a preview of this creation already in chapter 1. When he gets to the 6th day, he describes the creation of everybody, but in interesting terms. I want us to go back to that in Genesis 1:26-27. He said, and then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps in the earth. That's interesting that he mentions that, because that's going to happen again. So this is going to be part of our conversation today. Verse 27, and so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So a lot of them are like, well, why do we have that there? But then also, what seems to be an expanded account in chapter 2. And it kind of is. But one thing to think about is that Eve, as I suggested, in a sense, was there with Adam, even though he might have been just himself. Just think about it. The curse of sin described that in Adam, we've all sinned. So he was like the progenitor of that. So in a sense, Eve was there, but in him, if you will. So that's a possible explanation of that, why it changes up. So now we come to where Adam needed help. Adam needed help. Now, right after the garden commands of Genesis 2, 16 and 17, let's take a look at that again. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree in the garden. Remember, that was an expressed unconditional. He's like, chow down. Eat all of these trees. Go ahead. Eat them up. There's so many here. But verse 17, he says, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Then God seems to insert something that's like, okay, it's like he takes a side turn for a second and comes back. He says in Genesis 2:18, he says, then the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. Okay, that's interesting. First he says it's not good. But that's kind of interesting because I'm not sure if this takes place after the seventh day or before. I'm of the inclination, because I do believe in the 6 literal days of creation, that this takes place after the seventh day. I may be wrong, but it seems to potentially be there. But I still wonder, God said everything was very good or good during those days. But now suddenly something was not good. Something was, the word good here can also mean beneficial. It's not beneficial for Adam to be alone. And so also, when we think about these things, when we read through the Bible sometimes, always remember that sometimes when we're getting God's perspective on things, it won't necessarily correlate to our perspective. Like later on in the Bible where we'll see that we're in the prior to the flood, where God regretted something. Everybody's like, well, how could God regret something? Well, that's where God's trying to explain to us in our terms. Not necessarily that it's hard for us to understand. So we'll get it in ways that we can understand from God, but it's hard to digest. So this coming from the not good ideas, coming from his perspective. One thing to consider as we get ready to come into this is that God knows what is best for us. We're all shaking our head up and down. Yeah, God knows what's best for us. Until our situations all go south and weird and wacky and sideways, then we're like, man, God, what's going on here? Sometimes we'll blame God, sometimes we'll blame the enemy. But see, sometimes when we blame the enemy, he's getting more credit than he deserves, because sometimes God's allowing things to happen in order to get our attention, in order to teach us something, and it's for the best. Shoot, I always love the idea that God doesn't always, thank God for unanswered prayers. Because God knew what was best. He knew what would work best for us. Sometimes we'll be praying for other people. This is what the Lord wants to do in your life. And God's like, what are you talking about? I don't want to do that in their life. I want to do something different. That's to do the best. But also, see, part of our understanding, again, is clouded because we live in a fallen world. What our flesh thinks is best. God's like, no, that's not the best for you. There's something else. And so what we think is good sometimes is also clouded and twisted. And that's something that we need to think about as we look at the scripture, especially as we look at creation, what's going on. Now, as we think of this idea of what was going on and what was best for Adam, remember, God exists as a Trinity. One God in three persons. Interesting to think of is that when we think of community, God has lived in eternal community. He knows what community is. And so now here's Adam, who lives alone. Adam doesn't have community. He has fellowship with God, but God even knows that he needs something else, that he's alone. And so God says he's going to do something. The last part of Genesis 2:18, he says, I will make him a helper fit for him. So a helper. What's he talking about? What's a helper? A helper is like a bringer of aid, refuge, a companion. That's who he was bringing. That's who he was planning on bringing. One who supports us in our task of doing the will of God. Often we think helper, does God mean that's a slave? Is that a bad thing? No, that is not what God meant at all. In fact, the Bible and Jesus uses the word helper to describe the Holy Spirit. God is described as our helper. In Psalm 33, verse 20, it says, our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help, our aid, our refuge. In a sense, our companion. You ever thought about that? When you're going through all the things in your life, God is there. He's walking with you through that. I mean, David talks about that. He's going through the valley of the shadow of death. Will not fear. You are with me. God is our companion. And that's a good thing. Not a servant or a slave. And then you think this helper is going to be fit for him. Or the other word is suitable. Suitable is the word for that. In other words, it's going to be someone like him. A human. The word also can be counterpart. I named the lesson today, counterpart. It be also it has an idea of being alongside. So these two words kind of go together. A helper that is like him. Counterpart, alongside of him. Also, it can be understood as being opposite. That's one of the things. So often, it's just like, I love it. I've made fun of eHarmony many times over. You always hear the idea. You always see the advertisement. Oh, we're just so happy together because we're just so, everything is so alike. Oh. And that's the way they portray the things because they bound to the compatibility that everything's right. But here's the deal. If everybody does exactly the same thing as you, within a little while, you will not like that person. Because they just do. Let's face it, usually the person we get upset with is usually the person that's most like us. Now, what we're looking for is somebody that is sometimes opposite. Which sometimes that can be very attractive. We're like, man, I'm horrible with math. Sarah's really good with math. That's really good. But there's times when it's just like things like that can rub us a little bit different. But and opposites can go after each other. But when I grow to appreciate that there's things that she's better at, and vice versa, I don't know what I'm better at, but I know she's good at a lot of different things. That those opposite things bring us together, complement us. And so, in a sense, this whole idea is a special sense to indicate Eve, this woman's likeness to him. All right, so God mentions that. What was Adam doing during this time? What was going on? So God describes this in a couple of verses, what Adam was doing. It was one of his tasks, and he wasn't taking care of the trees or anything like that. He was doing something else. And Genesis 2, verse 19 through 20, the first part of it, says, now out of the ground, just like Adam, all these things that were created out of the dust, the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock, to the birds of the heaven, to every beast of the field. So again, this is kind of an interesting task. What's going on here? Well, the whole idea is like in the Bible, what's one of the things whenever you would encounter a name in a Bible, we go check out what does that name mean? What's that name about? Why did they give that name to that person? Because the name means something. A name would describe often the nature of that person. Well, here Adam is naming the creatures. In other words, he's looking at what they do. Just like I can imagine, we call a giraffe, but he might have called it long neck or reach the high leaves. Some words or whatever meant that. Just like whatever it meant. A lion, it might have been named roar. Who knows? Or furry face. I have no idea. So he would have been naming these animals according to their nature, not just the animals, but the birds too. He's naming all these things. And when you're naming names, it's also an idea of solidifying his dominion. Because remember, God had told him, it's like, you will have dominion over these creatures. So now he's bringing them before him. And it's God gathered them so that he could do this, so that he could reach out and name them. Very interesting. And so he's showing them who's in charge and maybe introducing them to each other. It's like, lion, Adam, lion. There it is. It's just like, that's the way introductions would happen, I imagine. I don't know. Again, I'm coming back to where I'm thinking this happened after the seventh day, because I don't know how long this will take. This wouldn't, to me, it's just like when you get all the animals together, it's going to take more than just an afternoon. It's going to take a while for him to do this. I think that's the way I'm picturing it. So I'm picturing that this is an ongoing process. We don't know how long. Just like down the line, when we think about when Eve is created before the fall, we don't know how long that was. We're not told. So if you're thinking it happened the next day, you may be right. But we don't know. I'm thinking that they probably existed in the garden a long time before the serpent lied to them about the truth. So we don't know. It takes quite a while. But then he adds that last part to Genesis chapter 2, verse 20. It says, but for Adam, there was not found a helper, a fit for him. So there's that phrase again. He couldn't find a suitable aid, suitable companion. Couldn't find a counterpart for himself. He's all these animals, but no one like him. And I like the idea that says it's not found. It seems that maybe in this task of naming all these animals, that God was doing something with Adam. Adam, check out all these animals here. Go ahead and name them. And he's naming them, going down the line. But it almost seems to suggest that he's also not just naming, but he's looking for something. He's trying to find something. And he probably saw the pairs of animals. There's the hen and the rooster, all these different animals going down there, and he's like, maybe he's wondering, he's like, well, where's my counterpart? Where's the person that should be here with me? Where is that person? No animal was found to be fit for him. There were no suitable counterparts among the animal kingdom for mankind. Now this is kind of interesting, and I want to be very gentle here. For all the cat and dog people out there, I want to say pets can provide a degree of companionship. Okay, I understand that. I understand that many different pets, especially like dogs, cats don't care, but dogs do. You know, it's just like and they provide a level of emotional support and a certain level of companionship and aid and stuff like that. But they cannot replace human relationships. That's the cold hard truth. Like I said, I want to say it gently. And I understand, I see memes about this all the time where people are like, I love my dog better than I love people. And I'm just like, hey, the elbows flying. Like, but here's the deal. It's just like, the reason we get along with our pets better than we do people is because our pets don't talk back. Even though sometimes, I swear, Buster talks back. Buster's our chocolate lab. We'll tell him to do something. His way of talking back is to look at you and then yawn. That's his thing. Like, your commands, they bore me. And so, but in a sense, still though, we can still deal with that. Buster, kennel. You can't do that with a person. You might want to try, but don't do it. Get you in trouble. But see, that's the whole idea. It's just, with an animal, you can exert your will, where vice versa is not the same. And that's a challenge for relationships. That's why relationships are hard. Relationships, let's face it, sometimes we're like, pets are safe, people are unsafe. But that's the story of a relationship. A relationship with anybody, you're entering an unsafe zone sometimes, or at least what appears to be unsafe. That doesn't mean every relationship's going to be unsafe, but it's scary. It's scary to make a friend. It's scary to commit your life to another person, because they may break your heart. They may do something to emotionally hurt you, or worse. So that's where it can be tempting to like, my dog and cat, and that's it. You get to realize that that's stunting your growth. Because it's people that we need. Adam must have realized this in some sense. He's seeing the picture, seeing what's going on, and so then God begins to meet his need. And God makes a woman. Genesis 2:21, and so the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, he took one of his ribs and closed up his place with flesh. This itself is very interesting. Back in the day, a doctor from Scotland, Dr. Simpson, used this as his inspiration. He's one of the guys that, next to like Dr. Lister, for where we got Listerine, who began to explore the idea of chloroform, anesthesiology, to put people to sleep, to be able to do surgeries. This was his inspiration. He's like, well, look at what happened. I wonder if we could do that purposely, to put somebody in such a deep sleep that we can operate on them and they're not feeling it at the same time. He was a champion for that. Champion for a few other things, and medically wise, he was an innovator. But this was part of it, and it's very interesting to think about that idea that he put to sleep and God showed him that exactly that's what he could do. And it says in Genesis 2:22, and the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. It's interesting, he took a rib. There's a lot of interesting ideas about rib. You know that the rib, if it stays within the pericardium in here, if somebody took out a rib, but it's still in there, your rib is the only bone that will grow back. That's the whole joke. It's the thing. Well, who will be the one? Is Adam missing his rib? No, he would not have been. It would grow back. That's a very interesting quality about, that's why a lot of bone marrow stuff, they'll get it from the rib, not just the leg. Because the rib has other characteristics that other bones in the body do not. Imagine that. Very interesting. So the word rib is kind of interesting. It can mean rib. It's also kind of weird. In the Hebrew language, it's a feminine word. It's like the gender of the word, and it's a feminine word meaning rib. It connotates side. So they would also use the word not just for rib, but for a wall. There's this rib, that rib. Sometimes they would call it a rubber rib. It's just like it meant to be from this side. In the context, again, it also talks about this idea of the counterpart. This rib counterpart. The idea also connotating not just this rib is that it suggests that the woman is the other side of a man. Kind of interesting how they think about that, as the other side of a man. And then God brought her to the man. I love that he did that. It wasn't like Adam just woke up and he was like, yeah, there's a person here. Woo, she's hot. And they're like, look at this. But no, God put him to sleep, did the surgery, took the rib, made a woman, but then brought her to the man. And of course, we see this today in all of our wedding ceremonies. It's like, who gives away this bride? That would be a whole idea. We're picturing that very same thing from so long ago, where God did really the first wedding ceremony. Here she is. She is from you. She is yours. Wow. What an interesting stuff. And it's like, and I love what the man said. He immediately proclaimed something. So this points to the idea that he was looking. I truly believe God was using this and trying to help him understand, trying to help him see, because then Adam says this in Genesis 2:23, and then the man said, this at last. At last. So in other words, there was this expectation. He's been looking, not seeing anyone for him. So he says, at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. So there it is. He calls her woman. And of course, the word for woman there is not Eve. He gives her that name later on down the line. But only remember the word for man, though, is Adam. So she shall be called woman because she is taken out of man. Now, it's kind of interesting with this whole idea. It shows us the sameness, yet a difference. The man was created from dust, but the woman was made from flesh. So here already, there's like these differences going on. Sameness, but difference. That's why when we try nowadays, in our history, throughout history, of the relations and purposes and roles of men and women have gone back and forth. And many cultures handle it differently. And of course, I'm of the idea that not every culture is the best. So this whole idea when we think of multiculturalism out there, it's like, oh, everybody just got the best. No, they don't. Not everybody has the best culture. Let's face it, the New Guinea headhunters is not a culture I want to live among. It's just like, it is not good. So there's these different cultures handle these roles differently. But this is where we're going back to. This is the cultural reference that we have to go back to understand what's going on. And to give us our standards. Always remember that, this is, I've mentioned this before, but we think about how God thinks and how God does things, how He commands things. Often, of course, God gives us the standard. And we all want to reach that standard. We want to go there, but sometimes we don't make it there. Especially when nowadays we think about families. Everybody's like, well, everything is a family. No, it's not. There's things that people have adapted into a family and to try to make a family, try to make it a semblance of such, but that is not the standard. The standard of a family is man and woman, male, female, husband and wife. That's the standard. Now, I appreciate when there's broken homes and they're doing their best. All those things. I respect that. I know it's tough. I know it's difficult. And I know that a single mom trying to raise a kid, a single dad trying to raise a kid is very difficult. And sometimes they succeed. But just because they succeed does not mean that that makes that legitimate. It doesn't. Because the pattern is still the most healthy pattern. And that's exactly what the Lord is putting out here. But in this pattern, one of the things is that there's a difference. Man was this distinction, even Paul recognized this distinction. When he was trying to describe some, he was talking about do the guys, should they have long hair or short hair? He's talking about ladies, whether or not they should wear a hat, or whether or not they should have long hair, short hair. Just those kind of things. Just the standard cultural things of Corinth back in the day. But in that discussion, Paul says this. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 8 and 9. He said, "For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man." He's saying it because he's trying to provide a distinction. There's something there. There's a likeness. There's a counterpart. But there's also some differences. There's a difference in roles. And this is understand. So the way I think the Bible tries to help us understand is that in our humanity, every one of us are equal. Okay? In our humanity, we're equal. Yet there are real differences physically, emotionally, how we process our thoughts. Let's face it, husband and wives, they know this. How the guy thinks and how the woman thinks is a mystery for both of them. They're both looking at my wife, why are you thinking that? And she's looking at me, why are you thinking about the way I'm thinking? Well, there it is. That's how it's the truth. And the physicality. This is being proved again and again. You get these folks that, we get the men in sports competing against the ladies, and there is a difference. It just is. Let's face it, I love that. There's a really good example between Serena Williams and, let's say, the McEnroe. I can't remember his name.
John.
What's that?
John.
John McEnroe, thank you. He made a comment about the top tennis players in the world on the Today Show. They're like, who do you think are the top tennis players? She's like, well, he's thinking about some different guys. And then they're like, oh, what about Serena Williams? Very good tennis player. And he's like, no, she's not one of the top players of tennis. As a matter of fact, she's probably not in the top 200. They were upset. They're like, how can you say this? How could you, that denigrating for who she is? It's like, it's just not the same. And so they actually asked her about it, which is good. She's like, oh, you heard John McEnroe say this comment about, where he's at, and she's like, he's right. And they talked, she said, the way that ladies play tennis versus the way, she said, oh yeah, the men play much more physical tennis. They will kick our butts. And it happened to her. A funny story, they were in Australia, her and her sister were there doing some competition, and there was a level 200 area Australian tennis player there, and he's like, hey, well, let's see who can do it. Let's see if you can beat me. Of course, it's Australia, so the guy, of course, is drinking his way through this tennis match, but he beats them both 6 sets straight through, totally. Not because he's like a better tennis player, it's because of what he brings physically to the sport. This happened to a professional women's soccer team. I could never beat them. They would kick my butt. But they, as a professional Olympic level girls, ladies soccer team, in an exhibition match went against some, I think they were like 8th grade or 9th grade boys team. And the 8th grade, 9th grade boys team beat them. Again, it was just because of the physicality, the physical differences. And that is of no disrespect. You know why? Because a guy is not tough enough to produce a baby. Don't want to do it. Don't want to experience. Hats off to you folks. To you ladies that are tough enough to do that. But see, there's some differences there. And ladies, let's face it, when it comes to kids, this is why ladies are there. Because if ladies weren't there, the kids wouldn't survive. And I'm not talking about just feeding them. But girl! The ladies keep the kids alive. But then and it goes back and forth that what men bring to the table and what ladies bring to the table are just two different things. And that's to be appreciated and understood. Now again, this is the average general idea. There's always going to be exceptions. But remember, even though we always remember the exception is not the rule. In society, we must always deal with in generalities. Making room for exceptions, but generalities is what runs the show. Okay? And so God is giving us the general rule of what is to be. What was. This also applies to salvation. In salvation, there's equality. God makes this clear. Women do not have to do something different than guys for salvation. We have to all do the same thing. We all have to believe in what Jesus Christ has done and the free gift of salvation. Men, women alike. Matter of fact, Paul points that out. It says like male, female, slave or free, rich or poor. Everybody, when it comes to salvation, salvation is equally available for everyone who believes. That's it. It didn't matter where you came from. Remember back in that culture, that upset them. And a lot of times they would denigrate it, like, oh, look at all these servants and slaves that are coming to this religion. And they're like, man, this is crazy. Obviously, if they're there, I'm too rich to be part of that. But even Paul said, well, even if you're rich, God will accept you. It's okay. But the whole idea is there, but yet there seems to be distinction in roles. And not just between male and female, even within what happened when we do the gifting. Paul talks about this in Corinthians. He's like, hey, imagine the toe said, boy, I wish I was a hand. Or a hand said, I don't need the toe. Parts of the body that think they don't need each other. But no, you're all different. So there's this distinction just even between what the guys can do and what the ladies can do within the guys and the ladies. Not everybody can be a pastor. Not everybody can be a worship leader. Not everybody can do works of administration. Not everybody can. And so there's those distinctions. And I believe there are distinctions in between, in ministry, the roles for ladies and women and guys. Is that fair? No. Not fair. Not fair. Okay? But there are also exceptions. Paul had exceptions. That's what's so funny is everybody will look at Paul and try to figure out Paul. And Paul will sit there and say, ladies shouldn't be in this position. But then he writes and congratulates ladies that are in that position. Oh, you make my head hurt. So in other words, there was the standard, but then there were still the exceptions that still happen. And we have to work within that. I was describing to somebody earlier about the tensions that we see in Scripture. That's one of the tensions. It's there. And I probably won't have all the answers for you for that today. Then God has his design for marriage. Genesis 2:24, so he gets right at it. He talks about differences, but then he talks about marriage. Genesis 2:24 says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Jesus declared in his comment on marriage about this, because they came and asked him, the guys were like, again, trying to figure out things, and they're like, hey, what's this whole idea about divorce and stuff like that? And Jesus had this to say about marriage. He said in Matthew 19, verse 4 and 5, he says, he answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? In verse 5, he said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Always love this passage. Some people do not like it. Because here Jesus tells us who gets married. Male, female, man, and wife. Pretty clear. Always love it when some folks try to say, well, Jesus doesn't talk about this. Well, yes, he does. Right there. He lays out the standard. Tells us what it ought to be. And God's design, that's for his design for becoming one flesh. I know that there are folks out there who think that they can have a marriage that involves man and man, woman and woman. But I'm going to tell you this, they are living a very frustrated life because they cannot become one flesh. Those are designed that way. They can try, they can mimic it, they can pretend, try to live that fantasy, but that's all it is. It's a fantasy of foolishness. It isn't getting them where they think they are going. Because God's design is this. This is how you become one flesh. Their relationship is there also described in Genesis 2:25. It says, the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. The first time in humanity where she never said, does this make me look fat? This was not a question. Not an issue at the time. And guys, I have the answer. When she says, does this make me look bad? Nope. That's not the answer. Because you want to be truthful. I was challenged by a guy. We need to have as much truth as we can in relationships. So now all the guys are like, whoa, danger territory. Here's how you can tell the truth. What you say, you say, honey, that compliments you very well. Or you can say, I don't think that dress or those pants or whatever, I don't think they compliment you the way you would like. That says what they want to hear without telling them what they're afraid to hear. So that's the whole idea. And ladies, don't ask, does this make me fat? Okay? Don't do it. Don't put us in that heart-rending situation. We're already scared as it is. Help us out. You can also, ladies, ask, does this compliment me? Does this help me out? Help us out. Help us help you. There we go. Working together. Changing the world. Man and woman, man and his wife are both naked and we're not ashamed. Everyone, and I'm going to say everyone, craves this level of intimacy. Because that's what they have. A level of intimacy that on this side of the fall, we still don't understand. We want this. Everybody wants this partnership. They want that freedom to where they're able to converse and there's no fear, no self-protection, no self-promotion. You're just free. You're completely free with this person. They were not ashamed. Of course, this is an interesting idea. Is nothing deserving shame had occurred in their lives yet. Nothing had poisoned or twisted the sexual nature of the human relationship. So it's like they could see each other. There's ideas of desire, but not with any negative sense at all. It had not been twisted, it had not been ruined. And that's, I feel, again, I want to be gentle with this and as pastoral as I can be. But I feel sad for those in marriages that because of abuse or evil influences of any kind, or they cannot enjoy, or at least when you should be able to. Because there's times in lives when you just can't. That's just the way it is. Things happen, physical things happen, all those things happen. Age happens to where you're not able to do this. But I'm talking about in the normal sense, the general sense again. In the general sense, when they're not able to enjoy sexual intimacy that should be found in marriage, it's sad. Sad. For whatever reason. And again, when everything's healthy, right, it's what you should be able to enjoy. And it should be an enjoyment. The whole idea, you're not there to use each other, it's to share. And there it is. Again, because see, some people will see sex as ugly and yucky because of what they've been told. Well, it's not true. God invented sex. God invented it. He invented it for all that it is. Let's face it, for what mankind enjoys is completely different than what the animal kingdom experienced. Just the feelings that are involved, the emotions that are there. It's just completely different. And God made it that way. The devil ruined it. He ruined so many other things. But this is the standard. This is what it should have been. To be in this spot to where they were just free. Just free. Now, this passage, of course, there's a lot of things about it that I'm just putting forward. And I was thinking, man, there can be some amens, there can be some boos on this. Well, it depends on your perspective. And I can appreciate that. Again, this world is not the world that was. Men's and women's relationships now are rooted in a fallen place. The teamwork, the intimacy is now challenged. The shadow of what it was.
Starting route to
And that can be very difficult. But that does not mean that the information that here, we've been given a lot of information, even though it's very compact, but then it's a lot of information about what God intended to be. And that is pretty straightforward, and the difficulty comes in believing that what God intended was the best. That's the difficulty. That's what we're encountering in this world today. People don't want to believe that. for whatever reason. Sometimes it's rebellion, sometimes it's confusion, sometimes it's influences of others coming after them. Various things that twist it, take that understanding away, and we try to make what's exceptional to be the rule. And we know it isn't so. But at the same time, with those who are dealing with the exception, I want to encourage you again. You need to make a stand for what is the general rule, but have compassion and understanding for those that are folks that feel like they're dealing with the exception. We give them love and care, help them to understand that the general rule is the best. But God said so. God designed it that way. Think about a car. My car is designed to be on a street road. That's what it's designed for. It is not a Daytona 500 car. I'm sure, Dale, if I took you out to my car, you'd think, no, this car, Robbie, would not survive on a Daytona 500 course. It would blow up. Like it's not. That's if it stayed on the road. It's not designed for it. I can sit there, but I believe I can do it. I can race with the big car. No, Robbie, your car is not designed to do that. You can fantasize about it all you want, but you're gonna need a NASCAR level car to do it. A car designed to go on that course to be able to do it. That's what we have to live with. But God, that's not fair to all my fantasies. God says that's the way it is. It's like, sorry. That's the way it is. Father, I just pray for this truth. Father, so much of our lives, there are many parts of our lives where we're like, Lord, I want it to be this way. God's like, no, this is the way it is. But Lord, it's not fair. Life isn't fair. So Lord, help us to then to trust you. Believe that your plan, your way is the best. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's hard to believe. Help us to trust you. Help us to lean into you and believe what you have to say. You have our best in mind. Lord, I just thank you for giving us the revelation of what the first man and the first woman, the first man and wife were like, so we could understand. Thank you for that. Amen. Let's worship right now.